Today's guest is an executive coach, senior professional in human resources, and holds a bachelor's degree in speech communication. Over the past 29 years, she has helped thousands of executives develop their careers. Today, she's going to share with you new ideas, insights, and information to overcome post-corporate PTSD. Would you please help me welcome our good friend, Kate Walker? Welcome.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. This is a very important topic that we're going to talk about today, and I'd firstly like to learn about your journey as an executive coach. What was the dream that you started out with, and what excited you about that dream?
Okay, well, let me start the dream back at the age of 16 years old when I was in high school and in Sacramento. I live in California. And my very best friend was down in Los Angeles visiting her uncle who worked in the music industry. And she came back from that trip with all kinds of stories, especially about his office and how his office, they were all wearing jeans. They were just very casual. It was a very creative environment. They were playing music. They were having fun. It just sounded like the most incredible environment ever. And at the age of 16, I thought, that's where I want to be. I want to be in that kind of office. And that actually did shape. I knew from that point that I knew I wanted to be somewhere in surrounded by creativity. Maybe I wasn't the one being creative, but I knew I wanted to be in a creative environment. And that actually stayed with me for all of my career, side note. But I knew I wanted to be in a very creative environment. But I didn't know what I was going to do. Through college, I thought I might get into sports broadcast, but that didn't quite work out for me. Couldn't find the right sort of networks or internships to get over there. But I did find myself working after college at a temp job at a biotech firm, which was not creative. But I came to learn more about human resources. And I thought, well, this is pretty interesting. I've never even known about human resources. So what's this all about? So I worked in this biotech firm for about 4 months, learned more about HR, and thought, well, this is a pretty interesting career, but I've got to get to my creative environment. That's right. That's where I need to be. So by chance, I found a human resources job at a global advertising agency, working again as an HR assistant, starting really at the bottom and learning. But I felt like I'd found my home in human resources and learning more about all that career is about, and being in this creative environment. So I felt like I found the best of both worlds. So with that, I learned about human resources and coaching really on the front lines, in the trenches, on the ground. But through my career, I definitely went and got education about human resources, gained certifications, those kinds of things. I wanted to round out my experience in addition to just learning on the line, or on the front lines at the ground level. So that's how I came into human resources. And by way of that, when you're in an HR career, typically, well, you can either hang in the background and do more specialist types of work, or you can go kind of out on the front lines where you're working with the teams and the leaders and the people who are doing the work. And that's where I found my passion, was working with the people and the teams and solving the problems and getting into the rooms and talking about things. So that's where I found my passion for coaching. And knowing that I had found a passion for coaching, again, I wanted to augment my kind of on the front line skills and go get some education. So pursue different coaching programs and certifications, and here I am.
And during your time in your career, from first of all seeing this environment where people are wearing jeans, they're more relaxed, and you've gone into the bio firms, what were some of the personal challenges and obstacles that you had to overcome personally throughout your career?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, there's always the business challenges, of course, and dealing with very, very difficult situations. I think working in HR, just when you think you've seen something crazy, you then see something crazier and experience crazier. So nothing really phases me at this point in my career. No situation in the workplace is probably going to phase me. I think I've seen it all, handled it all, and also think I learned to be very calm and very even in the workplace, always bringing just a calm and an ease into any meeting, into any situation. So I think I was always able to keep people calm. I would say, challenges were probably really when I started a family. And then you get into the whole work-life balance situation where you're trying to do a great job at the office and do all the things and deliver the performance. But then you're also having to deliver the performance at home. And it's very tricky, especially when you're raising very young children. And my children now are teens. It's a little easier. But certainly...
It's interesting, mentioning children and managing your career.
Yes.
When I've done a lot of coaching, I've heard a lot of people say, my children are sick, my children are sick, my children are sick.
Yeah.
And I'd say to myself, today must be the day where every child is sick. And then as your children get a little bit older, you go, oh my gosh, I'll become one of those parents where my children are always sick. And that is a big challenge when you try to manage your career and your family as well.
Difficult. It is very difficult, very, very challenging. And I can tell you, walking through my day, being at the office, and maybe you have a sick kid at home, and sometimes thinking, a ball's going to drop. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be at the office? Is it going to be at home? I'm not sure where it's going to drop today. Mm-hmm. But I knew, you can try to juggle, you can try to spin all the plates and do all the things, but something may fall. And I think you just have to be okay with, I didn't meet that deadline today, but I'm going to give myself some grace because it was more important today that I be over here with my family, helping something in that area.
One of the problems that you're helping your clients solve as an executive coach is recovering from post-corporate PTSD.
Yes.
So in your definition, what is post-corporate PTSD and what are some of the signs and the symptoms of it?
Well, okay, so this is personal, actually. And I've been in corporate, as you mentioned in my introduction, for many years, a couple of decades, and loving it. Like I said, it was my dream from the age of 16. This is where I want to be. I want to be in the tall, high-rise buildings. I want to be in the glamorous places with the glamorous people doing the fun work. That was my dream. So I was doing that, but then I reached a point in my career where I thought, I having worked in human resources, I can do 50 different things. I'm good at 50 different things, but what I really want to do is I want to do these 3 things. I want to focus on them. And that was the coaching for me. So I knew I would probably, and I wanted more freedom and flexibility, frankly. So I knew for me that I would need to leave my corporate job and leave that structure to go pursue something on my own. So leaving corporate, of course, and I have that could be a whole nother podcast, but getting prepared to leave was a process in and of itself, making a lot of mental preparation and financial preparation, all those different things. And just to add one more thing, because I know you've mentioned you have a client that's been thinking of or has been leaving his job for 15 years. The phrase that finally came to me was, leap and the net will appear. Mm-hmm. So that's where I had to go. I did have to leap and the net will appear. So I took a chance in leaving corporate, and I was very excited. So as far as what is post corporate PTSD, I didn't even know. I didn't even think about that when I left because I was excited. So it's something that I came to understand on my own as I had been gone, and I was experiencing some things that I had excitement for my future, but I also felt some angst about the past. And it's like, when you're in corporate, it is very fun, but it's like, you need to be at your desk at 9 or whatever time it is. Be there at 9. You don't leave till 5. Here's when you can take a lunch. You sit there. That's your desk. That's your office. There's a kitchen. That's where you have your lunch. It's a very structured environment, which does make sense, of course, but stepping away from that, and again, I had been there, done that. So there's just some things I had to kind of recover from that. I can use the word oppression, but that's the word that comes to mind. It can be a little bit oppressive. So it's just recovering from those things. My last corporate job, I did have a commute, and I would go to the office. It could take me anywhere from about 90 minutes to 2 hours. Wow. And then I had to turn around and come back, and I'm trying to get to my kids. And being on the road for that amount of time is very, very stressful. Mm-hmm. And I was at a great job, and I loved the people I worked with, and I was in this commute. And some days I'm just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? That's my commute is something I've had to recover from. So what is it? I think it's just, it's an angst. It's something that's maybe not resolved. It's something that you have to, I was talking with someone a week or two ago. It's almost something you have to grieve. There's a little bit of a grieving. And sometimes the grieving is a little bit sad for that maybe loss of structure. especially if you're going into entrepreneurship. But there's also a grieving, and I have a notebook. It was more like my notebook of anger. This made me mad. This made me mad. I was out on the road this amount of time. So it was also a journal of some anger that I had to resolve too. So I didn't know what it was until I left, and I realized that I had these feelings inside of me, and that's kind of some feelings that were unresolved. So I had to figure out what that was for me,
I remember,
and then find different methodologies to release it.
I remember when I left my career, and I was a senior flight steward with Emirates Airline.
Yeah.
And we were living in Dubai, so we're expatriates. So when we left, we had to leave a country and return to a new country that we hadn't lived in before.
Okay.
And there was so much that we had to detach from.
Oh, yes.
I remember just resigning from the job, the whole process of resigning. It was so easy to get the job, but to resign for it was so much harder because we had to do visas, we had to leave houses, we had to sell furniture, we had to sell personal belongings, we had to ship them to a foreign country. And that was stressful. And then for the months that followed, you weren't used to having a regular paycheck. So we'd always get the paycheck on time.
Yes.
Whenever we did a layover, there was $100 in the hand. So I'd often go to a hotel and I'd put my hand out ready for my money. And then I'd have to slap my hand and say, no, stop it.
Not today.
The uniform, our uniform would be washed and laundered for us. We'd be driven to and from work. And there was all these things that we didn't have to do that a typical civilian would have to do. So all of a sudden, I've got to go to work myself. I've got to wake myself up. There's no roster. I've got to create a roster. There's nobody to hold me accountable. There's no sick days. There's no, we used to call it pressing two. If you were sick, you'd call Avita, which was a voice-activated system for Emirates, and you'd press 2 and you'd say you'd sick. But there was no press 2 anymore. The responsibilities were huge, and it took a long time to readjust. And definitely for myself and my wife, the post-corporate PTSD was real for us.
Yeah.
And we saw it in our other friends. They would return to other jobs and they couldn't settle in. They'd return to another country. They couldn't settle in. They'd start their own business, and all of a sudden they had all of these responsibilities, and that flight response would kick in and they'd want to run back. Just like me, I wanted to run back to corporate.
Yeah.
I even reapplied for my job, but before I left, I thought, Daniel, you know what's going to happen. You're going to apply for this job again. You better write a really nasty letter of resignation. So if they ever look at it, they automatically say no. So I went and applied for the job, and just like I predicted, they said, thank you.
Okay.
But no, you don't need to apply again. So we've experienced that. Now, for the people that you're working with, if this post-corporate PTSD is left unresolved, what are some of the impacts of that for their future?
Well, and I can speak from my own experience, is that there's just, and everybody processes differently. So that I'm just talking about my own experience, but there's just feelings of unresolved anxiety or unresolved, just there's a lot. And for me, it took a lot of journaling. And like I mentioned, I did keep 2 separate journals, one more of my kind of future self, focus ahead journal, and one, my journal of anger, my rage journal. It took that. I've been to hypnotherapy, quite honestly, just to try to release, to try to get those blocks that were inside me just to bust. There's so many different ways. I mean, I don't know if your audience, has any spiritual leanings, but definitely, have people in that world that I work with and talk to, just more of on spiritual advisors, if you will. So I've tried a lot of different things, really trying to release it. And I think at the end of the day, what I'm realizing is I didn't really know I had this. It took me a while to identify. It took time for it to resolve. And I would say it's probably not 100% gone, but I feel like a lot has been resolved. So yeah, I would say time and giving yourself just like a grace period to, you have a tremendous story yourself about the change and just the things that you have to release and detach from. So it can be a process.
Mm. One gentleman I was working with years ago, he had left the army, and for him, when he was in the army, he had a sergeant major, somebody that he had to report to every single day.
Yeah.
And he'd been accustomed to that. So if there was a job to be done, he'd go and do it and he'd report back.
Yeah.
And the function of the corporate major was to hold him accountable. And he knew that if he didn't do the job, he'd get a rap over the knuckles. So he'd do the job. But as soon as he left that corporate structure in the military and he'd become a civilian again, he didn't have anybody to report to. So as he started to build his business, he knew that nobody was watching.
That's right.
And he could get away with a ton of stuff. So in his first year of business, he'd done a lot of procrastination. And because he didn't have to report back to somebody, there was no punishment. So he found reward in not doing the jobs. And month after month, he fell behind. And then he realized his greatest problem was not having a sergeant major to report back to. And that really impacted him. But it took a long time to change that thought system. Thinking somebody has to hold me accountable to I've got to hold myself accountable. And that was that skill of personal accountability, which he hadn't developed. And I think for a lot of people, and as I mentioned before, a gentleman said to me recently, I've been leaving my career for 15 years. And I heard that and I said, you left your career 15 years ago? And he said, no, I've been leaving for 15 years. I said, well, what does that actually mean? And he said, well, I don't like it and I've been trying to leave for 15 years. And I said, that's a long time. But for him, there was so many fears involved. It was the fear of leaving the comfort zone. It was the fear of going into the unknown. It was the fear of losing his financial stability. What if I actually jump and the net doesn't appear?
That's right. That's right.
And so it's like, I don't want to be free falling. I've heard that. Another gentleman said to me recently, after 20 years of corporate, the only two things that I got was bad health and a lack of awareness. So the bad health spoke for itself, as you were mentioning before. He was doing 2-hour commutes every single day, long days, sleepless nights. And then he had a lack of awareness. And I said, well, what's the lack of awareness? What does that mean? And he said, I don't know who I am. He said, because I'm told when to start, when to finish. I had to ask permission to go to the bathroom. I had to ask permission to have a day off. I had to ask for permission to go on holidays. And he said, even when I went on holidays for my 1 week, I was sick the whole time. And he said, everything in my life for corporate, I was always asking for permission. And he said, I still feel like a child after 20 years. I don't know how to make a decision for myself.
That is a huge, gosh, I love that story. And I would have to say I dealt with a little bit of that myself. And having that boss kind of perched on your shoulder. You need to be at your desk kind of checking to see if they've messaged you or emailed you, and you've got to be on the ready to reply. The other thing that came up for me as far as post-corporate PTSD is, and you can probably understand too, as entrepreneurs, we're on our own. We are doing our own thing. We've got to self-motivate. And therefore, you are going to be subject potentially to judgment. Well, what do they think of that post I just made? Oh, are they critiquing how I coach that person? So that's another element that I had to get through as well, was that I guess fear of judgment by former coworkers or colleagues who doesn't wish me well. I mean, I left on a very high note, but I'm like, are they, are they critiquing me? What? Yeah, it's something you do have to recover from. Yeah, I love your stories that you've shared. Very similar.
Well, as somebody who's in corporate, there's another department who's going to take care of the marketing. That's the marketing department. There's somebody who's going to take care of sales. And if the marketing doesn't work, they get to take the bullets. If the sales team can't convert the leads, they're going to take the bullets. But once you become an entrepreneur and you're responsible for it all, then there's a lot of rejection that's involved, because now you've got to become really good with people. You've got to be the front line. You've got to be the mouth of the business. You've got to be the voice of the business. You've got to do the marketing. You've got to do the selling. And if it doesn't work, you cop all the bullets, and it does hurt. And you've got to learn to deal with rejection. Because when you reject a company, it's so impersonal. Hey, McDonald's, I'm driving down the street. I don't buy McDonald's. I drive past KFC. I don't buy KFC. I drive past Pizza Hut. I don't buy it. But they don't get upset. They don't shut the shutters because, oh my gosh, Daniel didn't buy our hamburger today. We're going to go out of business. They don't care about that. But as an entrepreneur, when you're selling yourself, that takes time to learn. How do I deal with this rejection? How do I put my message out there and deal with the crickets, the lack of response? I think that's even worse for a lot of entrepreneurs.
That's a good one.
I'd rather at least somebody say that sucks rather than nobody says a thing at all.
That's right. That's right.
That's a lot to learn.
It
Now, in your work as an executive coach, who are you working with, and what are the topics that they're coming to you to work on?
Yeah, so and here's another thing about being an entrepreneur. When you go out and speak in sales and marketing, and you get all the advice, you've got a niche. What's the one problem you can help people solve? And again, having worked in HR and in corporate, I have people knocking on my door with 50 different problems. I can solve all kinds of problems. I can do all kinds of things. But coming out of corporate, I do know that I was very passionate about working with leaders and their teams. There's something about the leader and team dynamic that I saw over and over and over again as being dysfunctional, and
that storming phase.
Oh yes, all kinds of breakdowns. And when I could get in and take a look around and see what was happening with the leader and the team and those dynamics, I always knew, okay, I see what's going on here, and it's not that difficult of a fix. So again, coming out of corporate, trying to find that niche. Well, yeah, I love working with leaders and teams. So it's that and it's interesting too. Sometimes leaders don't know that there's breakdown in their team. So when you're talking about the sales and marketing, the outreach, and you're chatting with people, it's like, oh, my team is good, we're good. It's like, I bet someone's on the brink of quitting right now and you just don't know it. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, or, the meeting after the meeting that happens that you're not aware. There's all kinds of breakdown and dysfunction. So what I like to do is work with leaders and teams to try to determine what's going on and where they can just elevate and make things better and make things more seamless and make things more communicative and make it more fun, So I don't think, like I said, I don't think it has to be complicated fixes, but yeah, so that's really where I'm landing right now is working with kind of in the leadership realm. And, the other thing too, I really love being a sounding board for the leaders, because sometimes they don't have they can go home and talk about the issues, but their partner at home may not really understand all the complexities of business and people. So I do like to be a sounding board for leaders who want to talk in confidence and maybe have a little bit of privacy about some of the things that they're struggling with or
blow off a bit of
what's
steam.
Keeping them up at night. Yeah, it's like, what, you can have the beauty of coaching. You can have a safe place to go have those vulnerable conversations and be supported and not judged.
For teams, we have that team dynamic, and there's 4 phases. And for new leaders, you might not have worked this out yet, but there's going to be 4 phases of the group dynamics. The first phase is the forming phase. And this is when a new group of people come together and we're all in the honeymoon period. We love each other. We're so kind and charming to one another, and everybody gets along until they don't. And once they stop getting along, we go into that storming phase.
Yes.
And it's where people start to rub shoulders. They start to become abrasive. They start to show their true personality, and we start to have conflicts. And conflicts are natural and normal in any group, because we're bringing people in with different characteristics and very different qualities that might conflict, but they also complement. And we've got to figure out, who am I in this environment? How far can I push the boss? How far can I push my team members without breaking anybody? And so we go through that storming phase. And in that storming phase, the leader has really got to lead and coach their people through the conflicts. And what I've identified is that there's 4 conflicts. There's a me conflict. And so if I'm an employee, I'm going to be conflicted internally, sometimes with what I'm doing as a career and what I really want to be doing as an individual. But I've got bills to pay, I've got babies to feed, breast milk's getting more expensive, powdered milk's getting more expensive, and I can be highly conflicted. Even a lot of people take a new role to get a new level of pay, but they feel conflicted.
That's right.
So we have me conflicts. Another conflict, which is common in team, is a me-you conflict. I might be a very aggressive person when it comes to getting results, and I'm going to push, but I'll be working with people who are more passive, and that's going to create tension. We also have a me-job conflict, and a lot of companies promote people simply because there's somebody there now in the business who can do this role. Hey, you've been here, you can do the role. Even if you're not qualified, we'll get you to do it. So you've been put in a new role, and your natural characteristics and qualities don't align with the role. So you have a me job conflict.
Yeah.
And the job of the leader is now to re-educate you, to lead you, to coach you, develop those new skills. But a lot of that seems to be invisible. Oh, you're a good employee. You've been here for 10 years. You did that. Obviously, you can do this. And then the fourth one is me environment conflict.
Yeah.
And some people can be very skeptical. They can be low trust people. Now, that doesn't mean that they're a nasty or a negative personality. They're just low trust. But if they're put in an environment that requires high trust, that environment doesn't help them get the best out of themselves. So all of those inner conflicts are happening also as the team goes through that storming phase. And that leader has to get them out of that storming phase into the norming phase so the dust settles, and then get them all to performing. But that's a lot of effort. It's a lot of hard work. And it doesn't happen placed. Time doesn't solve that problem. It's got to be done by a leader.
It does. It does have to be done by a leader. And I love that you know all these models and methods. You're very well versed in this as well. I can tell. But yes, it does take, how would leaders know that? Or everything you just mentioned. How would you know that? You're
must be the fairy dust. You know what that is? Your business card says leader. Your title is leader. You must assume competency. You must know it.
That's right. Well, and I think also as business leaders, as most would, you're focused on the business, you're focused on the deliverable, and you make assumptions that the team will come along with you for the ride. And that it's not always the case. I think it's probably more rare that everything is fairy dust and rainbows with the teams. There will be, there will be things happening that you may not. Yeah.
I think we assume competency. I think we just assume competency. It's like when you go to a doctor. When I go to the doctor, I just assume because they're in their white schmuck and they're in the hospital that they are qualified to deal with my problem.
That's right.
I've never sat down to a dentist and asked, where did you go to high school? Where did you go to university? What was your pass grades? All I see is the dentist in the dentist clinic, and I assume competency. When I hop in an Uber, I just assume that 99.9% of people are honest and trustworthy, and that he's got his driver's license and he's not a serial killer. When I hop on the aircraft, I just assume competency, and I assume that the company has done all their due diligence.
Absolutely. Yes.
So a leader, if your business card says leader, I've got to assume competency, but it's far from the truth.
It is. Yes. I think also going back to the entrepreneurial space, you have entrepreneurs or founders that have a product, and they know the product and they love the product and they know how to build the product or make the product and move the product, but they've never maybe they're a more early career entrepreneur, and they haven't managed people before, teams before. They've really been very self-driven. So I do see some breakdown in that area as well, with these very, very bright, very, very talented entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, who are out, selling the thing, building the thing, getting investors to invest. But yeah, don't look behind the curtain.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
I was reading some research recently, and they said at any given time in a business, 50% of people are ready to fire the leader, and 50% are ready to fire the company. Have you ever been in a position where you've had to fire the leader?
As a matter of fact, I have. Yes. And this is a very interesting story because this happened at the very start of my career when I was not as experienced. And I was in my first advertising agency in the HR department. And a couple of my colleagues had resigned to go on to other wonderful opportunities. So that left me, I think at the age of 25, in charge of the place from a human resources perspective. And granted, I took it all very seriously. I was very much, learning and growing and doing all the things. But I got a call one day from New York. I was in San Francisco. I got a call from New York saying, hey, we need you to do something. And I said, well, what do you need me to do? Well, we need you to go. So at that point in time, I had been reporting to the general manager of the company, again, because my boss had left for another opportunity. So I was reporting to the general manager, and a brand new CEO had been brought in to run the company. He was relatively new. So I get this call from New York saying, hey, you've got to go up to the CEO's office. And what's going to happen is the two of you are going to fire the general manager. I'm like, hold on, what? I'm firing my own boss? What? So again, I was very, very inexperienced. And that's, I talked earlier about just trying to be calm. And that may have been my first experience where I'm like, you've got to like put on your game face and breathe and stay calm in this situation, because this is crazy. This is something. So yes, I had to go up to the CEO's office, and I think he gave the actual, hey, you're fired, two sentence thing. That's the leader should terminate the employee. That's the proper way to do it. But I was left to do all the other things, have the rest of the conversation with my boss. I believe I also had to walk him to the door after he packed a box. So it was quite stressful.
Very stressful. These
and the general manager, the person I reported to, is someone that I very, very much liked and respected. So it was just a very tough day.
I could only imagine. Most people's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Now, for our friends who would like to learn more about what you do and start to follow you, where should we start our journey on your website?
Well, yes, I'm actually in the process of doing a few new tweaks to the website just to update and refresh some of the content, because I built that website a couple of years ago. But certainly the homepage is a great place to get a little bit more information. Some of my programs are listed there as well. If you're looking to interact with some of my latest thoughts and points of view, I'm over on Instagram as well. My Instagram is at the Kate Walker. You can find me there, and I try to post in my stories and post on my feed multiple times a week, just so people can get to know me and my personality and my thoughts on different topics. So that's a good place to get to know me. I'm on LinkedIn, Kate Walker, SPHR, and that's my HR certification. So you can find me in a few different places. But yeah, I like to play over on Instagram.
Excellent. Now, that experience you had at age 16 where people were wearing jeans to the office, that didn't influence what you're doing now by any chance, did it?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I'm a jeans kind of girl, for sure. Jeans and heels.
Awesome. Kate, thank you so much for being here with us today. For our friends who are ready to leave their careers, but they might have been leaving for the past 15 years and they haven't pulled the pin, they haven't pressed enter on that resignation email. What advice would you share with them today?
A couple quick things come to mind. First of all, I know for me, I had to really sit with what are my values? What are my core values? And some of my core values, and your values do change and evolve over the years, but my core values at that point in time when I was really getting serious about leaving corporate were, I really wanted to find greater freedom. So that was one of my core values. I wanted to find greater flexibility, those kinds of things. So I really had to tap in. Kate, let's get real. What are you looking for? What's important for you? What do you need to be happy and to be thriving? So I had to get real with what those values are, and if my current role was allowing me to really flex those in the way that I wanted to. Obviously journaling is a great way to get your thoughts out on paper. And again, you can keep the two journals, the future you journal, and then, your more sort of negative thoughts, keep that in a separate journal. And, clearly if you're thinking about leaving in a well-paying corporate job at that, which I had to sit down and do some financial planning. And I had to also do an exercise where if I leave, what is the worst case scenario? And I had to go there in my mind. I had to play that out with a coach who actually helped me through that. But I had to play out, if this goes down in flames, if the net is not there after I leave and the worst happens, what is it and what do I do? So I went through some of those exercises as well. So those are a few tips for anybody who's thinking about leaving.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to go over to katewalker.com today, learn about Kate's journey and follow her on Instagram and on LinkedIn and learn more, because if you've got a dream, you've got to finish one dream before you start the next. And what I heard many years ago from a very famous lady in Australia named Ida Buttrose, she said, the dream doesn't have to last forever. And if anybody like me, likes to press snooze in the morning, sometimes the alarm goes off and you're saying to yourself, oh, that was a good dream. And you press snooze because you want to try to get back into that dream, but you quickly realize you can't go back into the dream. And some dreams turn into nightmares. So if that dream has come to an end of corporate, it's time to start a new phase in your life. Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time, your energy, your wisdom.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. And friends, remember, one new idea at the right time is enough to change your life. Have a wonderful day. Kate, thank you